Thank you so much for being here. My name is Rob Klein. It is my ongoing honor to be the host of Oral Histories Live, one of my favorite programs, and if you won't tell my bosses at Hansher, my favorite professional activity that I do. Please don't call those folks down there. I need that job. Tonight, I am delighted to introduce to those of you who don't know her, Ellie Krug, and to welcome her friends back into her life here today. Ellie said something really fascinating to me when we talked via Zoom that has really stuck with me. She said, you know, Rob, the last 17 years have been like 100 years when it comes to changes for the trans community. And that's sort of an amazing thing, right? 17 years is not very long. My youngest child is 17 years old, right? And so to have all of those changes, but to also be at a place where we are, as a society, still struggling with what seem like pretty basic questions, is frustrating, I think, at least for me. And I anticipate that we will discuss some of those things tonight. Before we do, I should thank Mike and Esther Wilson, who support Oral Histories Live. They are not with us tonight. They usually sit right there so that they can scowl at me if I'm doing a bad job, which is, you know, feel free to scowl at me if you think I'm doing a bad job. I need someone to keep an eye on me. But they are the primary reason that we are able to consistently do this program. So next time you see Mike and Esther, if you would thank them, I would be grateful. Hi, Ellie.
Hi, Rob.
How are you?
I'm good.
Why can I hear you so much better than I can hear me?
I don't know.
Okay, that's all right.
But with my voice, anybody can hear me.
All right, even Jason, wherever he went. There he is.
Out on First Avenue, they can hear me.
That is fair enough. All right, so Ellie, we usually do this in sort of a chronological way. I thought we would jump in to everyone's favorite year in their lives, the year you were 11. And your family made a fairly sizable move across the country from New Jersey to here.
To Cedar Rapids, they did.
And as I understand it, you moved to Bowman Woods.
Yeah.
And attended what at the time was just an up-and-coming school that none of us who went to Washington even really worried about at all. And that school was?
It was Linn-Mar, yep.
And did you tell me, I think this is right, there were 165 people in your graduating class?
There were, and some of them are here.
Since some of them are here, can I say the year out loud?
Sure.
In 1975, right? I was just at Linn-Mar this weekend for large group state music something or another. There were 175 people waiting to get tickets. That's amazing to me that the school was ever that cozy. But you graduate from Linn-Mar.
Yep.
You have a high school sweetheart.
I do.
You decide to enroll in college. Where are we? Just over here at Coe College.
Down the road, yep.
And what did you study there?
So at Coe, I studied political science. I was in pre-law. I knew that I was going to be a lawyer.
Right, and so as I recall, you're going to get a very nice offer from the University of Iowa to study law there, like a very nice offer. And like you do, you decided to turn them down.
Well, so I had visited the University of Iowa Law School, and to anyone here who's a graduate of Iowa, don't be offended, but I really didn't like the place all that much. It was the old law school building, you know, before they built Boyd. It was dingy, and it just didn't seem very welcoming to me. But but Iowa was going to not only give me a full ride, they were going to give me a stipend so that I could live. You know, it would have been a really great deal.
Well, and I can see then why you turned them down. Some other school came calling.
So what happened was I had applied to Boston College Law School, as well as some other law schools, but at the time, BC Law, the dean there was from Iowa State. He was an Iowan. And I thought, well, maybe this will help. And they had waitlisted me. And so at that point, I took Iowa's offer and decided to go to Iowa. But a couple of weeks into June, BC wrote to me and they said, you're in, but you've only got 2 weeks to decide. And so I went out to Boston, saw the law school. I don't know if it wasn't any newer than Iowa, but it seemed to be a more welcoming place. Plus it was Boston, you know, it was the East Coast. Chance to go to some place that at that point I needed to get out of Iowa just because I just needed to do that. And so it turned out just wonderfully.
But as I understand it, Boston College was like Monty Hall, right? They weren't going to tell you what was in the financial aid envelope until you accepted.
That's exactly right. Boston College wrote to me and said, we can't tell you what your financial aid package will be until the end of September. So I had to make a leap of faith to hope that I would get some financial aid. And I had somebody in my family I went to and I said, can you back me up in case something goes awry? But you know, it turned out going to BC Law, going to Boston was one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. So very lucky.
And were you married when you left? Or did you get married while you were in Boston to the aforementioned high school sweetheart?
Yes. So those who have read my book know that I use pseudonyms for some of the people in my life, and I will do that tonight as well. So my high school sweetheart, Lydia, we started dating when I was a freshman at Linn-Mar. She was a sophomore, and in 1972 that was heretical. It really was a big deal. But it turned out that she was my soulmate. I didn't plan on that. And so she ended up going to Iowa State initially. She then ended up going to Co, but she didn't graduate when I did. I got out a year and a half earlier. When she got out of Co in December of 1980, she ended up coming to Boston, getting an apartment with 2 other women, and then the 2 of us were in Boston together. Boston College is a Jesuit school, so I took my last final on a Friday, and by the way, for the record, my last final will be 40 years ago on the 13th of May, okay, on Friday. I took my last final on a Thursday, and we got married in the chapel on Saturday.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay, so for those of you keeping score, throughout this entire period that we have talked about so far, Ellie was male, all right? So, but even
let me just correct you. I presented as male.
Presented as male. I always forget the verb.
That's okay, don't worry.
She presented as male. But going back to that lovely year, if I have my notes right, when you were 11, you were already sharing some clothing with your sis.
Yeah, I'm not at all proud of it, okay? But at some day in the fall of when I was 11 years old, 1968, with nobody's home, trust me, I went into my sister's bedroom. I stripped off all my boy clothes. I opened her lingerie drawer and put a pair of panties and a camisole on. And from the front, she had a full-length mirror in her bedroom. From the front, it absolutely didn't work. But if I looked from the side, like this, and looked in the mirror, there was a shot of electricity that went through me. Just incredible shot of electricity. I had never experienced anything like that before. But, you know, I mean, Rob, it was 1968, you know, I mean, the idea that your body, that your brain couldn't match your body, I mean, just so totally foreign. We hadn't even had Stonewall, you know.
Sure.
That hadn't even happened yet. And I literally thought it was just a phase. I did. I thought it was just something I'm going through, and that eventually I will outgrow it. And when I started dating Lydia, I tried to, a year in, now we dated for 10 years before we got married, so it took a while.
No rush.
But a year into the relationship, I tried to tell her, that I had these thoughts in my head and that I'd like to wear girls' underwear. And she freaked out, just absolutely freaked out. And I learned an important lesson that transgender and gay and lesbian and bisexual people learn early on. And that is, if you let people know what's in your head, who you might be, because I hadn't figured it out, but who you might be, you learn that you will lose people. You learn that you will be rejected. And so I knew I was going to be a really good trial lawyer, because in that one conversation with Lydia, I changed the subject and she went for it. And we never talked about it again for another nearly 30 years. So, yeah.
But in that time, there was a moment you told me about in Boston that seems emblematic.
Can I stop you? I also need to note for the record, Lydia has told me she does not remember me ever trying to tell her anything. I want to make sure that that's clear, okay? Since I'm in Cedar Rapids, to make sure the record is clear. Okay, go ahead.
Fair enough. Okay, so we were going to talk about Boston and a bar. And it wasn't Cheers. It was a bar you were standing outside of trying to make a decision about.
So in law school, I met like the second gay person I ever met in my life. And he had told me about a bar in downtown Boston where it was LGBTQ. And I just vividly remember being downtown one night, standing outside that bar, trying to get the courage to go in, but at the same time knowing that this was just, it was just too far. It was just, my whole world had been built around appearing and presenting as a straight cisgender dude, at that time with a mustache. So I passed.
You passed, but you also, how long after that experience did you say to Lydia, hey, I got an idea, we should move back to Iowa?
It was not, that was while I was in law school. So I was still I graduated from BC Law and I started practicing law in downtown Boston, learning how to be a trial lawyer. I got some of the best experience that any young lawyer could ever get. But these thoughts, as I explained to you, I thought that they would go away. I thought that they would absolutely go away when we got married. I had a stash of lingerie while I was in law school, and where I'd finally gotten brave enough to buy it, and I would wear it at times. I lived in a house with a bunch of guys, but it would be when they weren't around. And I just thought, okay, you're going to get married. You're done with this. This phase of your life is over. And the night before we got married, I took the stash and found a dumpster several miles away from where I lived, threw it in there, and I said, thank God I'm finally done with you. It's over. And you know what? For about 6 or 8 months being married, the thought stayed away. I was able to suppress. It's called suppressing. But eventually, within a year, I was wearing, she had the prettiest pink sundress. Oh my God. I was wearing that when she wasn't home. And then progressively, the thoughts became more intense. And there were a lot of temptations in Boston in many ways, because I also had same-sex attractions. It's a pretty sordid story, everyone. And it became very clear to me that if we stayed in Boston, I would cross the line. And I did not want to do that, in part because this is the early to mid-'80s, and I'm starting to read stories about gay men in San Francisco and DC and New York dying of this strange pneumonia, and then this different kind of cancer appearing on their bodies. And I just there was just no way that I was going to risk her life in any way for whatever was going on with me. So decided to come back to Cedar Rapids in 1987, 88, because it was safer in Cedar Rapids. Less temptation here. And we were going to come back and buy a house and raise a family. And that's exactly what we did. And me practice law.
And you're putting it modestly. You practiced law. You had a very successful law practice, yes?
I think so.
Tell us about that a little bit.
Well, I was in Boston. I worked for a law firm that represented railroads. And I learned how to try jury cases in railroads don't have workers' comp. So if you're a railroad worker and you get hurt, you have to sue, and you actually go to court and you have juries decide whether you're entitled to money or not. So I represented the railroads. I learned about railroads. I really loved them. I came back here. There was a railroad out of Waterloo that just started up. They needed a lawyer, so I started working for them, and that parlayed into me representing several railroads, and then a number of trucking companies. So all of that, they liked me because, and I know that there's at least one lawyer in this room who knows this, I was a very aggressive attack dog lawyer. I was the kind of lawyer that people wanted, particularly railroads, because they hurt people badly or they killed them. They wanted to be aggressive in being defended. But I was also very difficult to work for because I was trying to be a perfectionist. I was trying to be perfect as a straight cisgender man. Mm-hmm. And I expected everybody else who worked with me or for me to be perfect. And it was a recipe for disaster.
And that figures into, I have in my notes, my next note says, therapy, 1993. Yes. And so there's a sort of a series of therapeutic interventions that are more or less efficacious, right?
So the thoughts, so we come back to Cedar Rapids, we start to build this incredible life, we buy an old house, we rehab it, we then we adopt two little girls, and I'm making a lot of money as a lawyer. I have social stature and respect, but the thoughts of me being not a man and of same-sex attractions wouldn't go away. But I did not want to cheat on my wife. I just did not want to do that. I was not going to do that because it was wrong. So I decided I needed to go to therapy, find a therapist. But in Cedar Rapids in 1993, when I started therapy, the last thing in the world I wanted anybody to do is to see me sitting in a therapist office, okay? Because that would take away from the image that I had portrayed. I mean, that would make me look weak rather than strong. Those are, for everyone here, those are very erroneous stereotypes. Just for the record, everybody should go to therapy, okay? But I didn't understand back then. So I found a therapist who operated out of the basement of his house. Mm-hmm. And the deal was you would go into one room, and if he had a client, he'd come out another door, so you'd never even see each other. I started with him. I went to him and I said, listen, I don't want to figure me out. I don't want to know what I am. I don't want to get to where I need to be. I want you to help me stay married because I love my wife with all my heart and my children. And I know that if this ever comes out, I will lose them and a whole lot of other things. So I said, give me a mantra to stay married. Give me a mantra, something I can say to myself 100 times a day to keep me married. And the therapist knew nothing about gender identity. It's 1993 after all, and barely anything about same-sex attractions. But he knew a lot about AA. So
about mantras.
So eventually he gave me an assignment, a 12-step plan. Step 1, don't look at the Victoria's Secret catalogs that come in the mail for your wife. That lasted a week. But then,
that could keep a lot of people out of trouble, to be honest.
J. Crew and Banana Republic were coming, and not only did I want to wear the clothes, I wanted to be the person that was in the clothes. So eventually, and he thought it was work-related, so we worked on some strategies around stress, and those strategies helped greatly. Oh my God, he helped reduce my stress level with work, but nothing to do with what was going on in my head. And eventually, after 3 years, he said, I don't know what you are. He said, but you've got to tell your wife what's going on in your head, or you're going to kill yourself. And you see, I never wanted to tell Lydia what was in my head because I knew that once I told her, the very first question would be, now what? I never wanted to ever answer that question.
And so you did the only rational thing one can do in that situation. You fired the therapist.
I did, yep. So then I went and found a gay therapist down in Iowa City, Stephen. He was gorgeous.
I have a note about how yummy he was, yeah.
But I thought, you think you're gay, so let's go talk to somebody who is gay and figure that out. And he was brilliant. For a while, I thought, well, it's all about my father, because there was some real issues about my father. And eventually he said, after a year, he said, you got to tell your wife what's going on in your head, or you're going to kill yourself. So I fired him. And then I went to therapist number 3, a woman, because I figured, you think you're a chick, let's go to a woman and see what she thinks. And I had started with her about 3 or 4 sessions, and then something happened that changed everything.
And that something, make sure I have the right notes, is 9/11.
9/11, yep.
Talk to us about how that impacts your life directly.
So you may recall that on 9/11, 2 of the planes were out of Boston. There were early morning flights across the country because the terrorists wanted them loaded with fuel in order to take down the buildings. Well, I had taken early morning flights out of Logan when I practiced law in Boston. And on the night of 9/11, Lydia and the 2 girls and I were at St. Matt's Catholic Church, second row from the altar, second pew from the altar, and somewhere between the homily and communion, my brain got hijacked. And this is not at all an exaggeration. I wasn't in church anymore. I was on one of those planes, looking out the window. I could see the tower up ahead, and I knew that I was going to die. This was so incredibly vivid. It's still vivid today as I tell you this story. And then I did the silly thing that we humans do, which was, what would be your last thoughts, Krug? And of course, my last thoughts would be about my daughters and my wife and some other people that were important in my life. But then the very, 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 very last thought, before the American Airlines hit Trade Center Steel, the very, very last thought was coward. You're going to die a coward. And I had never, ever thought about dying like that, ever before. And I so loved Lydia, but I had a core fear, and one of my core fears was of dying alone. I did not want to die alone. And I knew that if this came out, that would be part of what would happen. I would be alone. I would die alone. And I knew that. I knew that on my deathbed, I knew that I could project from 2001 forward. By the time I would die, I would have plenty of money, millionaire several times over, all the love in the world between my wife and my daughters, and who knows who else would come into our life. All the things that any man could ever ask for. But to me, it was just so clear to me that on my deathbed, I would look back and I would regret my entire life for not having been braver. And to me, that was so much more important to me than love and money. It was way, way more important that I go out at least believing that I had lived as me and that I wasn't afraid to do it.
But to your point about your connection to Lydia and to your family, it's going to take a little time before you end that relationship, right?
Well, it was on the night of 9/11 that I said to myself, you're done. You're done playing games. You're done bargaining with yourself. You're just done. You're done doing all that. You're done. And you're going to go and live as whoever you are, whatever that may be. And so it was literally on the night of 9/11 at St. Matt's where I said, I'm going to break Lydia's heart. And it took 3 years to leave her. And some people in this room know how hard it was for me to leave her. Because how do you leave somebody when you love them? As she repeatedly reminded me, it is so hard to leave somebody when you love them. But I needed to love me. I really did. I needed to finally love me. And so finally, in 2004, I finally left on April 30th of 2004. I left my house for the last time and moved into another house. And I started this life first thinking that I was gay with a panty fetish. And it became very clear that gay men weren't interested in what lingerie I was wearing. But it also became very clear to me that I wasn't a man wanting to have an attraction and a relationship with another man. I was really a woman. I loved men. Oh my God. Anybody here is single and looking for a date? No. No,
That's not usually a service we provide at Oral Histories Live.
You can tell I'm desperate. With this voice, trust me, it's not easy, hon. But no, it was very clear that I am absolutely attracted to men, but only as a woman, not as a man. So it took, so I'm figuring all of that stuff out. I eventually found a therapist here in Cedar Rapids who had never really worked with anybody about gender identity, and she was tough. In the book, I call her Sam the Hammer because she was so incredibly tough with me, and I needed that. And then she was so incredibly soft, so incredibly soft. And she saved my life. She did. She got me to where I needed to go.
And it is in this period that you're going to set up house in Minneapolis and sort of be doing a back and forth tango of sorts.
Yeah, so in the years between 2004 and 2009 when I came out, I met a woman who, for a while we had a relationship, but then she wanted me to stay a man, and I knew that that wasn't going to happen. But she lived in Minneapolis, and so I got to know the city, got to realize Minneapolis is a very LGBTQ-friendly place. Very. And so I bought a condo in downtown Minneapolis, and I would go up. So this is 2008 to early 2009. I would go up on the weekends. I would dress as me. The pride of 2008 in the Twin Cities, very first time I ever went out in public. It took me 3 hours to put makeup on because I kept screwing it up. And I kept having to shower to take it off because I didn't know anything about makeup remover. It wasn't in the books. But eventually I went out and on Pride weekend, and it was my opportunity. I started meeting people. So I'd go up on a Thursday, stay in the Twin Cities till Sunday, go back into boy mode, and come back to Cedar Rapids, and nobody would be any wiser. But then I started cheating because it was too hard to go back into boy mode. So I started wearing skirts back to Cedar Rapids. Then I started kind of wearing makeup. I remember coming back once and going to Target out on Blair's Ferry. I had to buy something. And walking through Target with my hands like gripping the cart, hoping no one would see me, okay? Particularly my clients. But then eventually I needed, once I was back here without going up every weekend, I needed something for me. So I started wearing mascara, thinking that no one would know. I mean, my eyelashes were always, I had nice eyes anyway. I just thought nobody would figure it out.
Well, and it was
Wrong.
the 90s. You could have been into a certain kind of music scene. It could have been.
Well, we're talking, now we're getting to early 2009.
Oh, you're right. We have jumped all the way to 2009. So I love this mascara story. You're wearing the mascara, and one of your client contacts says, hey, let's go for a ride.
So I, again, representing a railroad, I had to sit in a deposition for several hours with a middle manager who I had never met before. Deposition is a very long interview under oath, with attorneys asking questions. I had not known this guy. You know, I was there, I had the mascara on, but otherwise I'm presenting, I got, suit and tie on and presenting as a man. A few days after that, I get a call from my contact with the railroad, somebody based in Waterloo who I'd worked with for 20 years. He's like, I just got my baby, just got a brand new convertible. And he's like, come on, let's go for a ride. I'm going to come down to my office, at that time was in North Liberty because of the flood. And he said, come on, I'm going to take you for a ride. So we go out for a ride. He drives 100 miles down some 2-lane roadway and get back to my office. And we're talking, because I've known this guy for 20 years. So we're talking about his kids, my kids, all of that stuff. He knows I'm divorced, but he doesn't know the whole story or anything like that. And eventually, as we're talking, just out of the blue, he says to me, are you wearing women's makeup? And it shocked me. It's the last thing I ever expected this guy to ask me. And I turned to him and I said, I am. And I looked damn good in it. And got up and jumped out of his car and slammed the door and ran into my office.
And so now the proverbial cat is out of the proverbial bag to a certain degree. What do you do next?
Well, that was on a Thursday. My associate knew the story. I went in and I talked to her, and her question was, what are you going to do? So the next day, I had to go back to Waterloo for another deposition, and this guy, the guy that confronted me, was going to be at the deposition. So I met with him beforehand, and I said, listen, here's the story about me. Here's what I'm transgender, I'm trying to figure things out. Can you give me 2 weeks to figure everything out? And then I'll come and tell the company. And he said to me, it's too late. I've already told the company. So I'm like, that was Friday. So over that weekend, because I said, all right, I'm in deep trouble now. So over that weekend, I composed a 3-page letter that told the story about me being transgender, explained why I got divorced, explained what it meant to be transgender. My name would no longer be what it was. It now would be Ellen, and that from here on out, this is the way I was going to be. And if you're my clients, please don't fire me. But if you're going to fire me, I'll help you find a new lawyer, because that's my obligation to you. And on Monday morning at 8:30, my secretary hit send, and that letter went out to 200 lawyers, clients, and judges across Iowa, and then across the country, because I had clients in other states. And we just sat and waited, the whole office, because at this point now the office knows the story, and because everybody's job was depending on what happened. I had several people working for me, and everybody waited. And then the calls and the emails, and then later the letters started coming in. And everyone, I've got to just tell you right now, it even makes me emotional even now, the Lynn County Bar, which there are several people here, was so incredibly supportive of me. I started getting emails, congratulations, what can we do to help you? Two lawyers two lawyers called me from the largest firm in town. I had, the year before, won a huge multi-million-dollar verdict against one of their partners. They called me on speakerphone. They said, Ellie, what can we do to help you? We are here for you. It was unbelievable. And then I had judges reach out to me, telling me how courageous I was, and not that I was thinking I was brave, I was just trying to survive. But it was so remarkable. And my clients were so good. The railroad guy called me a day after that letter, the general counsel for this major railroad. He said, I need a little bit of time to figure out how I was going to respond. But he said, we still want to use you. You're a good lawyer. We still want to use you. But then he said, but we got to talk about how aggressive you are in the courtroom. You know, aggressive male lawyers, everybody's like, they respect that. But an aggressive female lawyer? Ellie, what are we going to do about that? Because you know what that means. And I told him I was taking speech therapy, and I hoped that that would soften my voice as well as my approach, and he was good with that. So, and then I had a client, a husband and wife, who were being sued over the sale of a house over in the northeast side, a $600,000 house. So in 2009, quite the house. And they were being sued because the window sills, the bottom parts of the windows between the interior and the exterior panes had rotted. Well, my clients were air conditioner people. They never opened the windows. Mm-hmm. And the person who inspected the house for the buyers, he didn't catch it. But these people were being sued for $100,000. It was their own money. Mm-hmm. They came into my office. The trial was going to be 2 months away. I sat with them and I said, listen, you know, there's no judge in Iowa that won't give us a continuance because you got a lawyer that went from, you know, male to female, and you want to find a new lawyer if that's what you want. And they said, no, we don't want a new lawyer, we want you. So then the question became, do I try the case as Ellie, because the voice still doesn't match, because it was a fraud case. I didn't, you know, I'm worried that the jury would think my clients were frauds. Do we try it as me, or do I go back into boy mode? And I said to them, I said, because my hair was starting to grow out, and I said, I will go back into boy mode. I'll put a man's suit on. I'll pull back my hair in a ponytail, and we'll use my boy name, and we'll try the case that way. I will never, ever forget. It was a husband and wife. They were in their 60s. This was their retirement money that was at stake. It wasn't insurance money. I'll never forget the woman asked me, she said, Ellie, would you be comfortable trying the case back as your old self, as a man? And by that point, I was done lying to people. I was just done. I'm not going to lie anymore. And I said to her, no. I said, no, I wouldn't be comfortable, but I would do it for you because you're my clients and I care about you. She looked at her husband. She didn't ask. She looked at her husband. She looked back at me and she said, that settles it. You'll try it as Ellie Krug. And so we went down to the courthouse. I got the judge and the opposing counsel to agree that I could tell the jury that I was transgender, because again, I didn't want the jury thinking I was a fraud, as well as my clients. I got everybody on the jury to agree, swear that they wouldn't hold me against my clients. There was one gentleman, an older gentleman, with the Wall Street Journal and a golf shirt and shoes, who just
you know, with a Wall Street Journal.
He just hesitated when he said, I swear. So I struck him, got him off the jury. Mm-hmm. We had more women than men on the jury, and I knew that that was a good sign. Tried the case for 4 days. Jury came back in my client's favor. And I thought, okay, this is going to be hard, but I still have it. We still can do it. I broadcast that to all my institutional clients, the railroads and the trucking companies. And I thought for a while, no one's going to lose their job. I'll still be able to pay for my daughter's college educations, and maybe someday I'll be able to retire with a nest egg.
So there are lots of things to like about that story, right? To feel proud about. There's that fascinating moment, though, where someone says, Ellie, we're fine with you being a woman as long as you're the right kind of woman for the profession that you're in. Damn, we're bad at being like good to each other, right? And with that as a lead-in, the good feelings are gonna go sour here pretty quick.
So within 6 months, my major client, which was a railroad, which was 50% of my business, came to me and said, well, I got a phone call in early November, an early morning phone call at like 8:30 in the morning from this railroad. It wasn't from the president, who I'd worked with regularly. It was from the number 2 person. And the call went this way. It said, Ellen, effective immediately, your services are terminated. Deliver all files to our office by 5 o'clock today. So with that call, that was the end of my law firm.
So, after all the things that it takes to close down a law firm, you go back to Minneapolis.
I do. I moved to Minneapolis. I moved to Minneapolis also on the 1st of April of 2010.
You are ridiculously good at dates. I can't remember what today is.
Well, some days you don't forget.
Yeah, well, fair enough. That is fair enough. Okay, so you are back in Minneapolis, and a brand new sort of startup nonprofit is interested in talking to you.
Yep, so I found out about a legal access nonprofit. So it didn't provide legal services to people, but it helped people in legal need to connect with free legal services, so it was like a navigator. And they had created this organization on paper. They had a board of directors. They had $500,000 worth of funding, but they didn't have an executive director to start it. So I went and interviewed with them, never expecting that they would hire a transgender woman who sounds like a dude, looks like a chick. Never expected that they would do that because it was all white, straight, cisgender people on the board. But they did. They hired me. Unbelievable. And so I started down this road of building this legal access nonprofit. It was incredible. For me, what we haven't talked about is I'm an idealist.
That was my next note. The very next word is idealist.
So as you and I talked about, I was alive when Dr. King and Bobby Kennedy were alive. I started reading the newspaper when I was 7. And they were on TV, and they were, all 3 stations, 3 networks. And they were in the newspaper all the time, and their words sank into me. That's why I wanted to go and be a lawyer, because Bobby Kennedy was a lawyer, and go change the world and make the world a better place. And so for me to go, and when I transitioned and I came out and I lost my law firm, I could have rebuilt it. I could have stayed here in Iowa. I could have rebuilt it. It would not have been easy, but I could have done that. But then when it all fell apart, I just said to myself, go be yourself. You're 100% who you are. Go be an idealist. Go be Ellie. Go somewhere where you can live entirely as you. So that's how the nonprofit, it helped fulfill my idealism. It helped me get to think that I was doing good in the world, helping to make the world a better place. And so it was wonderful. I did it for 5 years. It was great.
And around the same time, you write your memoir, which apparently is book 1 of 2. There's some serious expectation here in the front row for a second book. Nothing makes people want you to write a second book like writing a first book. So you write the memoir about this experience that we've been talking about, and you're going to also, how soon from there do we start transitioning into the sort of gray area thinking work that you do? Tell us about that.
Well, remember, 2009, it is like 7,500 years ago for transgender people.
Right.
So back in 2009, transgender people weren't very visible. So people would come to me and say, what's a transgender? Come talk to us. So I started to do that informally. Then I created a formal Trans 101 program about what it means to be trans, how to be welcoming, that type of thing. But then it became clear to me that people were hungry not just to learn how to be welcoming to trans people, they were hungry to learn how to be welcoming to anybody who is different or other. So I created this program called Gray Area Thinking, which is a tool set on how to be welcoming to people who are different or other. Leslie Wright is here, and literally the day before the pandemic launched on all of us, I was in here in Cedar Rapids doing gray area thinking training for people in Cedar Rapids, for community leaders. It's a great training. People love the training because it's about how to see people differently than we ordinarily do, and how to be kind to them, and use of compassion, but also taking risks to interact with people and to become familiar with them. People who are different or other, to become familiar with them. I tell people in that training, we won't get through the crap. Do I need anyone here to define what the crap is? We won't get through the crap unless we're willing to become familiar with people who are different or other. And that means taking risks. That means sitting with people. That means getting to know them and sharing your story and you sharing that. And that's what this training is about.
All right. So we have arrived at the present, more or less.
Yep.
So it must be time to take questions from the audience. Don't be shy. Or, do be shy.
Well, let me just share what I do right now. So I ran the nonprofit for 5 years. But I was speaking on the side, so it became, people still wanted me to speak, so I went to my board and said, don't give me any raises, just give me more time off, more vacation time, and I'll use that time to go do speaking. But by 2015, early 2016, it became very clear to me that that fed my idealism even more than what the nonprofit did. So I went to my board in June of 2016 and I said, I need to go do this. I need to go do this full time. I need to go see where it leads, how I can connect with people. But I'll help you find a new executive director, which I gave them 6 months notice, and so we went through that process. But in September of 2016, I created my company, Human Inspiration Works, and it's a play on words because human inspiration does work. It does cause people to change the way they see the world. If you get inspired, we won't change by being ordered. It doesn't stick. But if you touch the heart, if you touch them here, oh my God. People are like, yeah, I want to be different. I want to do different. I want to be more welcoming. So I created the company, and it's just gone on. Mm-hmm. So altogether, I've done more than 1,000 talks since 2009.
Wow. That's amazing. Okay, so I'm going to ask the question that I thought you guys were going to ask. Let's talk about Linn-Mar High School for a second. Just in broad terms, ironically enough, it's your alma mater that is currently sort of in an interesting moment. And I'm interested in your thoughts about how people can be allies for their own kids, for other kids, how to have that conversation with, I think we all understand parents are like, what do you mean you're not going to share information about my own child with me? And those
right.
So there's a lot of difficult issues in play, and there are also like real live human beings in play. Right. How can we help?
So first of all, you can support the 5 school board members who voted to affirm gender identity policies at Linn-Mar. You can support them, you can write letters to the editor, you can show up at meetings where you know that they're going to get harassed and harangued. You can speak out in their favor because they're doing what needs to be done, which is leading. You get elected to lead. Secondly, it is so incredibly important to let young LGBTQ humans, but particularly trans and non-binary kids, because right now there are 10 states that have passed laws telling transgender girls they can't play sports from kindergarten all the way through college senior year. There are 3 states that have passed laws that say that doctors and medical professionals can't provide medical gender-affirming care, like medical care, like medical treatment, like hormones, like hormone blockers to to humans younger than 18, and in Alabama, it's younger than 19. And in Alabama, it's a felony, a 10-year prison sentence for any doctor that violates that law. Know that all of that kind of stuff feeds into trans and queer kids generally. They read about this stuff. And what is the message? The message is you are unworthy. The message is you're not worthy of equal protection of all the other children. We are going to single you out. And so what you can do is, at a minimum, tell young queer kids they matter, that they are worthy, and do it like verbally, like talk to them like face to face or on the telephone. Don't send them a text, don't send them an email. In the perfect world, you talk to them verbally, you say, I love you, you matter to me, I care about you, and then you write them a letter or a note. So then they have the words. So the words are here on the edge of the table, you know, in their bedroom, the edge of their desk. So when things get hard, they can go to the note. They can pick it up, and they can read words that say, they are worthy. It's a whole lot better than scrolling through some cell phone trying to find, where's that message?
The power of paper and pen. I like that.
Yeah, but I mean, you can support CR Pride. You can go to Pride Fest. You can go, if you have a business, have a booth there. You can support them financially, show up at their events. But I can, you know, I just can't tell you enough. So one of the things I've been doing now, living out I moved from downtown Minneapolis out to not even the suburbs, it's the exurb. I joke, I can see the prairie from my bedroom. I'm not kidding. I can see a farm from my bedroom. I go 1 mile and it's just gravel roads and farms. That's all it is. And I've started working with the schools out there to talk to their LGBTQ kids. They have gender and sexuality alliances, GSAs. And I go there, and I've been meeting with the kids and just sitting with them and talking to them about, you know, what are their mantras? What's the thing you say in your head every day? Is it positive or negative? Or talk about the power of human authenticity. We talk about grit and resiliency. I've just got to tell you, everyone, these kids who range from 5th grade all the way to senior, they are amazing. They are self-aware. They are smart. They are incredibly astute, but they are also hurting tremendously. They're being bullied, although I think the school district is trying its best, okay, but you can't be everywhere where kids can be mean to kids. And some of them are not accepted at home. I mean, you know, and they're hurting. So talk about the need for a GSA in your schools. Support the GSA. Contact the school. Do you have a GSA? Do they have a budget? I'd like to give $50 to their programming budget. Can we help in some way? You know, because we need to show up for these kids. We need to show up for all kids, absolutely. But and I'll just stop in a second, but can you imagine if 10 states passed laws saying that diabetic children cannot participate in sports from kindergarten all the way through college senior year? Can you imagine? Because, you know, somehow it's going to harm the children, or they might be a bad influence because children will see them have maybe possibly a shot, some kind of a reaction on the playing field. We want to spare our children that. Can you imagine the reaction in this country if such laws were passed? There would be total outrage. And yet, there's not much going on. There's not much outrage happening right now. So,
questions?
You talked about how important it is to have the support person in a young person's life. Who was that person for you? I know you mentioned Sam the Hammer, but was there somebody in your personal life that was a resource, a source of strength?
So 2 people. One was my brother, my younger brother. So I came out to him before I came out to most anybody else, and he started calling me sis. You know, like 2 years before anybody knew the story. And then there was somebody I went to high school with. His name is Dennis Tharp. That's a real name, not a pseudonym. His nickname is Thap, and that's the only way I talked to him. He was the quarterback on the 8th grade Linn-Mar football team. I was the frontline guard. We have been best friends for 52 years. This man, I told him, he didn't care. He's like, I don't care, pass the beer. And he has stood by me. Everyone in his family gets to wear a family ring, so there's a family ring for the Thap family. And so do I. I would not have been able to make it without him.
Okay, now that Ellie has made us all cry, are there other questions?
Well, I want to be mindful of our time.
Yeah. Sorry, are we at time?
No, no, no.
Okay. So my question has to do with the recent leaked Supreme Court opinion on overturning Roe v. Wade.
Yep.
So my understanding is, in the dicta of that opinion, there's some pretty aggressive language potentially that could potentially be used to overturn a lot of fundamental rights. Obviously, gender identity isn't currently protected under the 14th Amendment, but with the potential loss of that avenue to guarantee those rights at the federal level, I'm curious what, if any, avenues you do see at the federal level specifically for guaranteeing transgender rights?
Great question. So Samuel Alito, who has authored Dobbs, is the least accepting of the Supreme Court justices towards the LGBTQ community. When Roe goes, it's going to go. I'm very positive of it. When it goes, it's going to be a cascading effect for other rights, and I think there are rights, other rights that the Supreme Court has declared under the penumbra of privacy, that the government doesn't have a compelling interest to get into the lives of certain people. I fear that it's just a matter of time before marriage equality, Obergefell, that they will say, that precedent is only, 2015? So that's only 7 years old compared to Roe being 50 years worth of precedent. And we have Lawrence v. Taylor that declared Texas anti-sodomy laws unconstitutional back in the 90s. That'll go. Potentially we have even the laws against people of different skin colors marrying, Loving versus Virginia, because it's based on the same kind of penumbra, same kind of reasoning. That may very well go. That would be the last to go. I'm positive of that because of the outrage, extra outrage that would cause. And you ask me, what can the federal government do?
Or what options might still exist?
We have no options. We have no options. There will not be an Equality Act. It's not going to happen. I predict it will be a patchwork of states that protect rights equally and 100%, and other states that don't. And I predict that there will be these oases where people who are different or other they will go and they will want to live there, and they will be productive states. And they will take a lot of the young people. Think of the brain drain that is going on in Iowa right now. By people the messaging is on the wall. Because our young people, if you're straight and cisgender, our young people want to be in a diverse world. They want to be around people who are different. They understand the value of that. And Iowa's losing people, South Dakota's losing people, Nebraska's losing people. Young people don't want to be in a place where the state is intolerant. So come to Minnesota. You know what? I told Rob this. I want to come back to Iowa. I am an Iowan. I love Iowa. It is in my blood. I love Cedar Rapids. My God, I love this city immensely. But I waited until the 2020 election because I needed to see how it went before I made the decision to uproot and come back here. And when I saw how the election went, and then when I heard that I think it was your Senate leader said, we have a mandate from the voters and we're going to use it. If you are LGBTQ and you hear an elected person say the word mandate, you know that they are coming for you. And that is, am I wrong? Exactly what has happened, right? And so I decided, I said I can't come back to Iowa. And that's why I went and bought the house out in Carver County. Otherwise, I'd be either here or in Des Moines, probably in Des Moines. Sorry.
Iowa City is nice.
Yes, as I've been reminded about Iowa City as well. But this is real, and I find it hard to believe that you have business leaders who want the state to be a certain way, supporting the current political establishment, with them being so short-sighted and not understanding that eventually they're going to lose their pool of imaginative young people, because they are not going to be here. They're going to go somewhere else.
Okay, first she made us cry, and then she riled us up.
Sorry.
And now I'm going to ask, we have a question we always ask at the end, and it's going to land a little differently today than it usually does. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Ellie, if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
To have let Lydia go. Because I undermined her life. I took away the future that she believed that she would have. And that I regret that. I regret it greatly. And for the record, she's gone on and she's remarried and she's happy as far as I know and all of that stuff. But it was just the classic kind of quandary. And one of the mantras that I had when I started going to therapy was, how could you ever love yourself more than you love them? I mean, if I said that to myself once, I said it 1,000,000 times. How can you love Krug? How can you love yourself more than her and the girls? You're gonna hurt them. You're gonna destroy them. Destroy at least this family that they had. But I came to realize, in the end, we have to love ourselves. We have to love ourselves. And we have to do it more than we love anyone else. That is not selfish. That is just simply self-preservation. Because if you love yourself, all good things can flow from that. But if you hate yourself, which I did, nothing good flows.
Thank you for being here tonight on an important night at Oral Histories Live. I feel obligated to say the History Center does not endorse moving to Minnesota. If you would, even though they are not here to glare at me, if you would help me thank Mike and Esther Wilson for their support of this program. Live, if you would tell your friends, if you would point them to the eventual posting of the video from tonight, that would be wonderful. And if you're not a member of the History Center yet, before you move to Minnesota, you should really give Jason a little money. Again, my name's Rob Klein. I'm very grateful that you are here. I'm so grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all.